Hi, Jonathan. This is Sarah Dzida. It is April 28th, and I am answering your AI for UX design questions verbally. Okay, starting at the top. Introduction to AI and design. Question one, what inspired you to explore the role of AI in UX design, and how does AI improve the design process? This is what we're all trying to figure out right now, right? I mean, to be in technology, to be in UX design, as I've been for oh gosh, 15 years, is to constantly be learning and constantly integrating new tools and methodologies and frameworks into your process. It's about packing your kit with skills so that when you come across a certain problem, you can take out whatever you need in order to solve it in the best, most efficient, most optimized way possible to create a valuable, sustainable, useful experience, not just to the end users, but also to the business as well. So um, AI is the next disruption in technology. It's not really an inspiration. It's a necessary fact to figure it out. And so I, like everybody else in the field, am trying to figure out how to use it. And the way that I have found I've done this in the past is that you pay attention to your process, you know your process very well, and you understand the parameters of the tools, and you start trying to integrate it into your process to see how it's going to work out. So that leads us to question number two of, can you share an example where AI directly contributed to a website's design and user experience? Um, I would say not in my own work successfully yet. I've seen lots of examples of where clients have tried to use it, um, but it's still not necessarily being used in a way that is optimal. So I read examples across other sites like Lenny's newsletter. I think he has an AI search engine that he uses that he quite likes. Or in Ben's Bites about people, there was a story I read recently about a developer who sold a startup with vibe coding that he had done in less than 2 or 3 months. So the examples are out there. Um, but at least like right now, where I'm at least seeing the work happening is that it it is still a big question, and that people, from a business perspective, what you saw originally in the first year is people sticking in an AI API and then users not really knowing how to use it, and especially in websites. And or what's happening is that companies are trying to create websites by using AI. So just going to an AI um, like UI Izzard or VO or Replete, and just typing in what they need and seeing what happens. I tried to make one with Framer, I think like a year or so ago, and what's happening generally in those scenarios is that like the function is being put in, or the AI is producing something, but it's not the result that needs to happen. And this comes to why you've probably asked me to talk about this newsletter, because as a teacher at USC, I've learned the most about AI implementation through my students' work, because they are going through the design process to create websites for small Los Angeles businesses. And so we are doing the design process, and we are integrating AI either through a process or through process in the discovery phase, or as a feature or function in the site. And that when you are just doing the good work of a UX designer, you can create um, an AI tool that can have significant value to a business. And I think also in my work with the students and seeing them do this over 2 or 3 semesters now, I'm seeing what will probably be the future of the internet as that happens. So that takes us to case studies from my article. And the article that I have on Medium is just one example. I actually have three more, which if this newsletter is going to be published, I'll try and publish so that you can share with it as well, because the 4 examples give really great insight into what I'm talking about. But the 3 examples, or actually, I'm like, let me go see my notes that I have, is the one in the Medium article is about a bookstore. And then the 3 other case studies are a coffee shop by Donald Glover, actually. It's Donald Glover's a celebrity endorsed coffee shop. And so the people aren't there for the coffee, they're really there just for the celebrity connection. An antique store, a tile and antique store, and then a writing nonprofit. So 4 very different businesses that the students used really interesting AI, integrated AI in interesting ways across the 4 case studies. And so your question here of could you walk us through one example where this made a big impact on user engagement is that in the case studies, the process in class, what happens is that we do discovery. So the first half of the semester is discovery. We do business research, user research. They go talk to 3 to 5 real users, usually on the ground in the store, because they have to choose Los Angeles businesses with a physical location. I want them to go and observe the users in their native habitats. And we do a competitive audit. And then based off of that, they create a feature set. And on the feature set, this is where we start getting the first integration of AI, because these 4 students and the case studies that you can observe in the articles that I wrote is that they decided to put in AI functionality. And so it was going to make a big impact on user engagement, because the RFP that I provide the students is that the website needs to create engagement and customer acquisition. So you're using the website as a tool to funnel customers deeper into the experience by expanding the business's footprint into the digital landscape, but also trying to find connections into the physical landscape as well. And what you see in the example of Serving Now is that the AI personalization is a way to help people really have a unique experience in a bookstore site. So really having more of a conversation, really trying to create a search experience, which is less about algorithms, less about SEO, at least from the perception of the user, and more about having a conversation, something that is a little bit more like a rabbit hole that takes you into product pages and book experiences that maybe you wouldn't have thought that you wanted to find. What's happening right now in the search experience that we have on e-commerce sites, especially if you look at Amazon, is that advertising and weighted algorithms have really kind of obscured people finding something organically, spontaneously, with delight. And so this is where, especially with the example of Serving Now, and really the other 3 case studies that I have for the students, that this impact on user engagement was actually a way to put power back in the hands of the user, to circumvent all these people who are trying to get their products or their experiences in front of the user, and really giving them the opportunity to fall into something that they might actually really enjoy. And that's something that's been missing from the internet experience for the last probably like 10 years, especially. So it was nice to kind of see it be reclaimed through an AI search functionality. How did AI help with design iteration in one of your projects? What was the result of using AI for rapid testing? So in the student case studies, we really didn't do this. Rapid testing wasn't something that we did. One thing I'm going to do with what's been happening every semester is that I have been integrating teaching AI in a different way with students. So the Medium article that you found, Jonathan, was from 3 semesters ago, and that was where I started seeing the students implement AI functionality into the class. For the last 2 semesters, I've been integrating AI functionality into the process itself. And what I'm going to be doing with this particular semester, which is ending in the next week or 2, is I'm going to have them try and make use their wireframes to create a prototype, and that would probably be where we would see rapid testing. But when it comes to design iteration with the features and functionality, so in the case study that I have on Medium and the other 4 case studies, what was interesting was that the original design iteration of all 4 students was that they, in their design deliverables, like in their sitemap and their wireframes, in their flows, they were like, the AI experience is kind of a black hole. They were like, well, AI does something, you know? And when we looked at it, I was like, well, this is really problematic because obviously, especially a year ago, there's this idea of vibe coding or prompt engineering. Like, how do you get the AI to have the experience, give the user the experience that they want? And what I found through these case studies that I hadn't thought about was that, like, the LLM experience that the students needed to give users wasn't one like Claude or ChatGPT. Like, we know, because we have done user research, because we have because we understand the experience and we understand the behaviors that we want to create to achieve the business goals that we want, we knew what users were going to come and do. So, like in the case of Serving Now, people aren't going to come in and ask any random question that isn't related to culinary experiences. Like, if they're going to use the search function or they're going to use the chat experience, they're going to be searching for something that is related to the products in the experience. And so what that meant was that we could create parameters through the design documentation that would help the prompt engineers and the marketers and the company and the business make the decisions that they had to make in order to create the proper iteration of the product itself, the whole website. And so this was true across the other 3 case studies as well. In particular, the Donald Glover coffee shop example, because that was a scenario where the original website itself was just a 1-page animation that had no information about the coffee shop. Because again, the coffee shop's business model is less about coffee shop and more about being Donald Glover's coffee shop. So I had multiple discussions in the design iteration with the student about how, and this was actually what I think triggered the inspiration of using AI features to the other students as well, of like, we have all this work of Donald Glover, and in theory, in this project, you would probably have access to Donald Glover itself. So you could get permission from him to use his work to create a Donald Glover chatbot, AI, LLM. And if people were coming here to have a connection with Donald Glover LLM, then, we know that they would be looking for certain experiences. And so this is also where in design iteration, I was beginning to understand that branch narrative is becoming an even more important component probably in the design process, because there are people who are still going to want to have a linear approach, and there are people who are going to want to have some structure in choosing a path, and then there are other people who are just going to want to like jump into the deep end completely. And you can create certain mileposts in the LLM experience for that. That's what I was finding out through the case study. So it's not so much that the AI helped predict user behavior or enhance accessibility. It's that like we were able to use user behavior and research that we did to predict how they might use the AI and what they might find valuable about this. And this is the disconnect that we're finding across the implementation of AI, is that businesses in particular, understand the high level benefits of it, but they're not able to connect it to true user need or true user behavior on the inside of the company or even on the outside. And so this is where what's happening is users are going straight to the Claude or the ChatGPT to find the answer that they want, or they're just not engaging in it at all. And so it's less about the AI, I think, being the driver, and more about the designer, the understanding how to leverage the AI, or making intentional decisions about how the AI can be leveraged in order to create the behavior that we still want from users as they move through the experience. And at the same time, creating something interesting and unique in a website experience that hasn't been seen before. The website itself is in a state of evolution because of this new functionality and this new technology. So that takes us to AI tools and integration in design. Which AI tools do you find most valuable and how do they support UX principles? So as I said, like each semester I'm integrating AI in a different way as I'm learning myself. And so my AI tools are an example of how I'm learning about things. So in the beginning in 2023, I've generally found, and this is what I tell the students as well, of like don't try to overuse tools. Choose one tool and see how you can integrate that tool throughout the course of a project. And then you recap, you have a little retrospective and you see what was successful and then you go from there. So my first iterations of tools have mainly been with LLMs like ChatGPT and Claude. And what I'm doing with the students right now is like, as we go through discovery, as we go through design, I end every week's class with a little discussion of like, well, how can we use AI effectively to help us in the design process? And what I've learned in doing this is that it's not about ceding the driver's seat to the AI. It's about how do you still stay in the driver's seat so that you understand why you are asking certain things of the AI. So like, for instance, when we're in ChatGPT in the design process with competitors, it's not a prompt of, hey, ChatGPT, what competitor should I look at? Instead, it's asking ChatGPT to give you something like in the case of like serving now, just like, hey, ChatGPT, can you tell me other culinary independent bookstores in the United States? ChatGPT can then give you answers, or Perplexity or whatever tool that you're using, and then you can look and you can see what information is correct. I tell the students, because this is a strategy class as well, that like as the strategist, it's your job to always be able to explain the why behind what's happening. So you need to use the tools, whether Figma or Sensei or whatever, to explain why you are using something in a certain way. And in the case studies that I have from the students, they did this in a really interesting way. So the nonprofit, for example, they and the tiled antique shop showed how they could use ChatGPT or Claude to generate all the product descriptions in a certain voice or tone that they define. So the intention remains the purview of the designer or the strategist. And it's the chat GPT that is using it to generate these things more efficiently as we move through. Because again, these are small businesses, so we want to help them feel that they can actually achieve these new experiences instead of just creating a benchmark website that they could get from anyone. In the case of like the bookshops, especially, I love it because students come in and they think that they're just going to create an e-commerce site, but it's just like, really, what's the point of creating an e-commerce site for a bookshop when there's Amazon? So how can you make this website experience something that's unique and interesting so that it is meaningful to your customer? Or like for students who choose restaurant websites, like restaurant websites are really very simple. There's nothing really too crazy about them. And so that really leaves the floor open for so many interesting and creative things. And I want to push the students to see that. And so the question is like, how can you use AI to help open your mind to that? And especially when we're dealing with like local businesses versus online businesses, the website really acts as a gateway to expanding the physical business's footprint in to an audience who isn't location dependent. And so that also is where like when you're using LLMs for prompts or for user research of like, how can you help the LLM expand your mind by prompting in a certain way of like, are there things we should think about? Are there other ways to look at it? But the LLM gives you that information so that you can make those decisions. Um, and this is where I think like AI has augmented creativity in design rather than replacing it, because what I'm seeing is the mistake is if you go to the LLM and you take the LLM's output at face value. Instead, it's a way for you to look across the output that it gives you, and you understand better all the pieces that have to come together and all the decisions that have to be made, and so you can pick and choose what has to be chosen. And this is where, again, in the case studies that my students were making, I think it was just really coming out so nicely because they were truly creating the experiences and then they were putting in and earmarking where the LLM should be activated um, to achieve business goals, to help with user engagement, to help with customer acquisition. Okay. Okay, challenges and ethics. What challenges have you faced with AI bias in design and how did you address them? I think the biggest bias is the one that we have dealt with since UX really came into prominence more than a decade ago, which is that the main decision makers who are hiring you or who you need to help make decisions to understand to build the experience is that they have a bias about design. And that bias is that there's a right way and a wrong way to design. And that bias also is that design begins with visuals. It doesn't, they don't understand all the complexity and decisions that have to be made. And so when it comes to bias, they have an AI bias, this idea that they can go to an AI and the AI will generate what they need fast. But what I've learned as I watch the students do the design and in my own work is that the decisions still have to happen. And so the question is whether the person who needs to make the decisions is aware of that. If they go straight to an LLM and ask for questions or a design tool, they're going to constantly get things that they don't want to have. And then they will have to learn how to use the tool and go through the whole process anyway. And so that is not changed with the rise of AI. That is still there and has to be addressed. There's also an AI bias that we have as designers and strategists of, fear, obviously, as to what this means and how this will change our work and as to whether we're going to be valuable and what it means for humanity as a whole. But the best way to understand a tool is to use a tool. And so I'm about 2 years in, and I would say that like I'm obviously not an expert in any way. I'm not like the people in Anthropic or Claude who are using AI every day, every minute of their lives, but that I'm having a better understanding as to when I want to rely on AI to help make my process easier. And part of the reason why I'm able to do that is because I understand what I am looking for. So it's very key that you actually really need to know what the output means to you. If you are looking at the output and you don't understand everything that's been given to you, then you don't necessarily understand what bias or what is missing until you're deeper into the funnel. I had a client over the last year or so who tried to use AI to create and write their website, and it just wasn't happening. And the reason it wasn't happening was because internally in the business itself, like they need to make decisions of like, what are we even trying to say anyway? And what is our value proposition? What are our products? And AI can't tell the business that. Those are human decisions. And so my process had to stop just with the writing part of itself and really like backtrack to, you know, um, to the strategic part. So this is also, I think, when it comes to AI bias in design, which is that like when you have people who don't know what's going on, they're just going to assume that whatever the AI produces, this is what they should have. And what I really want the students to do in this course, because they're Gen Z, and so their experience with websites, they come in thinking websites are really old fashioned because they're social media people. They don't think that websites have any meaning or any purpose. But I really want them to confront that there is what their expectation of a website is, and there is what a website can actually do. And so the four case studies that I have of these students is that like where they might have started in week one and where they ended up is very different. And the reason why it's different is because they go through the design process and they go through the design process of really understanding the problem and the need and the behavior and realizing when to activate the benchmark and when to push the benchmark into something more disruptive, like with an AI feature or function. Um, and this is where instead what you have is that you have, instead of what businesses are doing of just like, hey, use AI and think from an AI perspective, is you're thinking of the experience. And when you understand what the experience is, then you can then make a very thoughtful decision with your team of engineers, CEO, C-suite marketers, whatever, of like, is this the way we want to integrate to use AI? And is it important for people to know, for it to be obvious, for setting up a future that's more sustainable as the website is going to grow and as AI becomes more universal across all the sites. When it comes to data privacy concerns, I'm definitely talking to the students about how with prompts, they're not going to be able to necessarily stick in data into the prompts. And so this is again about understanding being in the driver's seat and ceding control of the driver's seat to the AI, because if you cannot put in information which is sensitive into the AI, then you have to figure out how to prompt around it. And so that's doing like generalized prompts of like, hey, what can you tell me about this scenario? And then using your own knowledge, which as a strategist, it would be your job to understand where that knowledge is coming from and tying it together. And I also tell the students of this, like, the more you see the information repeated across different channels, the more you can trust it, because that means like if your quantitative data is supporting your qualitative data, and if your quantitative and qualitative data is being supported by an AI synthetic user, then like that probably means that that is even better to follow than anything else. User-centered design. Has AI ever helped uncover a UX pain point that traditional methods couldn't detect? Can you share an example? No, not yet, that I am aware of. I would say what the case studies are showing is how traditional methods are evolving thanks to AI. So again, in the case studies, what you look at is you see design documentation that is discussing how to create an AI experience through a website, and how the traditional methods can be adapted to help the engineering team, the leadership team, the marketing team understand what has to be built and why. The pain point that it's also isn't necessarily uncovering, but it's showing how AI can be an interesting solution to a pain point that still puts control in the hands of the user, and still what I tell my students, which is that like we're still creating experiences where there are humans at the end of each one. So there's a human at the end of the business and there's a human at the end of the user experience. And AI is just a facilitation or a bridge in order to do that. How you ensure AI insights align with human-centered design and meet user needs. This is, again, you need to make sure you are not ceding the driver's seat to the AI. You are not asking it for permission. You are not asking it for design is all about intention. And because design is about intention, it means that you understand the intention behind every decision that is being made. And when you when you give that to the AI, you are losing the power of design. And in the semester when I started realizing I had to start teaching AI to my students, it's because they were going to the AI and saying like, AI, here's everything I have, what should I say? And it was very obvious to me when it came out that like, there was an AI involved. So it was the language was a little bit off, the decisions were a little bit off, it wasn't lining up with things that we had discussed. I couldn't see the connection to what was going on. And when the students were called forth in order to explain why they would put something in a certain deck or something, they couldn't do it except to say AI did it. And so the AI insights, I think, goes back to learning the skill of prompting, of like, are you asking the AI to tell you what to do, or are you leaning on the AI to help you make the decision? And that comes to the prompt. And this is what I've seen more and more as I've helped students integrate UX into their process. For instance, for business research, it's not, hey, what should my business know about a website? It's, hey, what can you tell me about the business marketplace? And this is something that you can then cross-reference with the research that you're doing yourself on like a content audit or through your stakeholder interviews. When you're doing your user research, it's not, hey, can you create a persona for me? It's more like, these are things that I am noticing. What can you tell me through sources that validate or show this? And then the AI gives you information, and you can then be like, oh, this is true or this is not true. Or another thing that you can do is you can then put in your information, which again, privacy-wise, you'd have to know if you can do or not, and then ask it to maybe put it into a table or chart to help you understand or read or analyze it. Again, this is where you are in the driver's seat. You are not the person who's just waiting for it to spit something out and then you're putting it in front of people and being like, well, I guess this was right. So that's not the reason why you're hired, and that's not the reason why you're there. The future of AI and UX. What emerging AI tools are you most excited about, and how do you see them shaping the design process? So I recently took a prototyping with AI class, and that was really interesting to me because what I'm going to start trying to do in my own process is trying to prototype more with AI. And I'm not exactly sure how that's going to work, but the biggest thing that I have come to understand is that, like, as designers, we've been beholden to engineers and to businesses and their visions in order to do our work. And now with AI tools, this means that we can be the visionaries and we can be the engineers and we can make the things that we know have to be right, and we can do it faster without people fighting us. So that is something that I'm going to try and explore more in my own work to figure out what's going on. And this is what I'm moving forward with also in class, is I want to start giving students an opportunity to do some more of the vibe coding, or seeing how their wireframes can be turned into real life clickable prototypes. And at this moment, I don't see the end of mockups or wireframes because, again, there is intention and there is decision. And we don't want to be a scenario where an AI makes something and then we have to take it apart, explain why it's wrong. It's, again, instead like, how can we move through the process faster? And because you are someone who understands all the steps and all the decisions that have to be made in the process, how can you help facilitate that in the business to get an outcome that will, grow the business or help users better? How can we make AI? How could AI make websites more adaptive and intuitive in the future? Well, I know, like, for things that I hate in design and that I would love to see is, like, for instance, I would love to create just one version of a website and then have that just, be made responsive without me having to like reorganize everything. Or it would be really nice to have um, to be able to prompt within Figma itself of like, hey, relabel all these layers, or like pull these forward, or make this a component without you having to like go and try and figure out all the features. So I think there's a real tension as to like what control we are ceding in design. But if design is and strategy is all about intention and understanding the connection between those intentions, then it's less about the end user experience and more about like within our process, how can these tools help us, do the less of the grunt work that we hate and more of the high level intentional strategic work that helps us connect our design decisions to real life outcomes that matter to people in the business better. What advice would I give to designers new to using AI in their work? I've been doing this since 2011. I've learned a new tool. I've learned one or two tools every year of my life because, again, in technology, you always have to be learning new things. There is no right way of doing this. There is nobody who knows the best way to get things done. And so the only way to really learn how to use AI is to try and implement it. And if you try and there's tool overload right now. People have so many tools that they say you can use here. So you want to think like a UX designer, be very problem focused of like, I have a problem. What tool do I think would be the best to use? And so what I've done for myself is that I have tried to implement ChatGPT. I've taken one or two courses. I waited a good year and a half before I signed up for a course before deciding to do something. I've paid attention to how other people are using it and try and use the use case. And and again, in school, like I'm trying to teach it to other people. So it's all vibe right now, and that's the biggest challenge for adopting it. Is that we are at the beginning of the curve, and that the people who are defining it are people who use it every single day and every minute, and you are not that person. And so part of me thinks like in the long run, if AI is truly going to be something that is going to permeate so many aspects of human life, then they got to make it a lot easier so that I don't have to think so hard as a user. But as a designer, as a strategist, the more I demystify it for myself, the more I can demystify it for other people.
And the more I can understand how it might work in my own process, the more power and control and agency I have overall. So, and this is what I aim to teach the students, because they are new and they are young and they're going to the professional world where they're going to again hit all this AI bias from higher ups who don't understand it to engineers who understand it from a technical perspective, and then from users who don't understand it at all to, maybe a little bit. And so the connection that they can make is that AI is still, at least at this time, meant to be for humans and to facilitate human behavior and progress and desires and goals. And if that's the case, then what are the connections between that so that we can make experiences that matter to people? Because that's what my goal on earth is to do, is that I want to make experiences that are helpful to people and not harmful. And that's what how I want to move forward. So what key takeaway about AI and UX design do you want our readers to remember? I think that was it. How do you see the balance between AI and human intuition in the future of UX design? Um, I wonder, truly for UX design, is I've been in UX design since 2011, and I I wonder if it's going to be relabeled, but at least for like the balance between AI and human intuition, what I keep finding is that like the process is still the same. AI is just a tool that is going to be integrated. And I've worked with a couple of companies where the goal was AI first, and it's been something that's discarded because, what's the point of the AI if people aren't going to use the experience? And then I've been in other scenarios, and what I see in this case study here, of just like you're starting with, like a business, like a bookstore or like a coffee shop or something, where all they're maybe thinking about is like, let's just make a coffee, website the way everybody else makes a website. But there is truly innovative opportunity, which maybe these small businesses did not have access to, because AI makes integration of this functionality a lot easier. And it's no longer so cumbersome, or the development process isn't so complicated like it used to be. And this is now accessible to them, and they can create something really amazing for their users. I guess let me know if you need anything else, Jonathan. I hope this helped, and I'll try and get those other case studies up. All right, bye.